Hello, thank you for listening. This is a brief introduction to Passiontide 65 by the Holy Agony. My name is John Dios. This is a brief introduction for listeners who are unfamiliar with the source material, since it's presented kind of obliquely and some of it is also not in English. If you wish to proceed directly to the music, go ahead and skip this track. Passiontide 65 is a passion play, which is a musical telling of the end of the life of Christ. It was originally conceived as an album. It was sort of a demo for the Holy Agony that I produced to get Jess involved in a project with me, and was never really completed, so I have released it now while we're on hiatus. The name Passiontide comes from the last stretch of Lent, which coincides with the time in which Christ was betrayed, convicted, and crucified. 65 is a reference to the year 1965 in both the liturgical reforms in the church in the 60s. 1965 was the first year English was allowed in Catholic liturgy instead of just Latin. And it's also a reference to the psychedelic Jesus movement art, which influenced this project quite a bit aesthetically. Things like Jesus Christ Superstar and Pasolini's Gospel. It's split into 3 acts. So Act 1 concerns primarily setting the stage for Lent. Each act begins with an intermission. The intermission of Act 1 is a sermon from Good Friday in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, which is where I stayed for a week in a hotel while I was finishing this project and working on the first episode of Holy Agony with Jess. I just happened to have recorded this by chance, and it kind of sums up the entire project very well, if a bit lengthily. Each track corresponds to an important day or a Sunday in Lent. In the Catholic liturgy, things kind of follow like a story one week after the other. So the first track is "You Are Dust," which corresponds to Ash Wednesday and is specifically a reminder of man's mortality. The first contribution that Jess ever made follows immediately afterwards is a poem by T.S. Eliot called Ash Wednesday. The next track is called 40 Days, and it refers to the 40 days that Christ spent in the desert being tempted by the devil before his passion. That's where Lent comes from, is the 40 days that he spent. There are some samples from a passion play which are somewhat out of sequence and could be confusing. They're meant to foreshadow what eventually happens at the end of this play. Act 2 concerns the miracles in Jesus' triumphant entrance in Jerusalem. The intermission is one of the Gospels from I believe the second Sunday of Lent, which concerns Jesus performing the miracle of an exorcism. So the first track is based on the Transfiguration, in which Christ reveals his true nature to the apostles, and Moses and Elijah appeared at the same time. The second track concerns Christ removing a demon from a man who was unable to speak with him, became able to speak, which is also believed to be something of a metaphor for for redemption and the removal of sin. The third track is Rejoice for Gaudete Sunday, which is kind of a way station in the middle of Lent, where we foreshadow the eventual resurrection. The next track is the beginning of Passiontide itself, Passion Sunday, which is the music is based on Psalm 42. Judge me, O God, and distinguish my cause from a nation that is not holy. It corresponds with the Gospel, which is the story of Jesus being condemned by the Pharisees and chased out of the temple. That is followed by Hosanna, which is the description of Palm Sunday, when Jesus entered Jerusalem to great fanfare and adoration. The next track is Spy Wednesday, which is when Judas betrayed Christ to the Pharisees. Maundy Thursday, or the Last Supper, is what the last thing that happened before Christ was betrayed. It's notable for the institution of the Eucharist, the Catholic celebration of consuming the body and the blood of Christ, and it is also where Christ instructed his followers to pray the Our Father, and that's how Act 2 ends. Act 3 concerns the arrest, suffering, and crucifixion and eventual resurrection of Christ. The intermission is from Pasolini's Gospel according to St. Matthew. It's a brief retelling of what occurs in this act. The act is split into 4 parts. So there is Good Friday Part 1, describing the agony in the garden where Christ prayed and asked the Father if there was a way out of what he had to do, and accepted the cross if it was necessary. The apostles fell asleep instead of staying up and praying with him, and he was arrested and betrayed by Judas. In Good Friday Part 2, Christ is questioned by Pontius Pilate and sentenced to death in accordance with the wishes of the Jews, who are the same ones who celebrated him just a few days earlier on Palm Sunday. And Good Friday Part 3 is Consummate est, it is finished. Christ bows his head and dies, and he pays the price for our sins. There is a brief sermon at this part explaining how the price paid by Jesus and not being a nice person is the core of Christianity. The final track is The Harrowing, which is based on the Catholic belief that Christ spent the day that he was in the tomb actually in hell, freeing the righteous pagans and non-believers who died before he came. That's the Saturday before Easter. And it ends with the Gloria in Excelsis Deo and Easter bells as Christ is resurrected on the 3rd day. So that is a briefest rundown I could manage. Thank you for listening and enjoy.